I never used to think twice about the crack in the old wooden fence that divided my backyard from the neighbors. It was just a flaw in the wood, splintered and sun-worn like everything else in this dusty Arizona suburb. But lately, I've found myself lingering near it more often than I care to admit. Sometimes with a drink in hand, sometimes watering the same patch of dry grass longer than needed, always aware of the faint rustle on the other side. And lately, I've felt eyes, not just casual glances, but the kind of gaze that stays, watches, waits. It's been 3 months since I moved back into my childhood home after losing my job in Denver, 30 years old and living with my mom again, unpacking boxes full of dreams I thought I had sorted. I spend my days freelance designing logos, websites, even some digital art commissions, but it's quiet. Too quiet. And then there's him, Mason, 18, just out of high school, lives next door with his aunt. I remember seeing him as a gangly teen mowing the lawn in oversized basketball shorts and earbuds dangling from his ears. But something shifted this summer. He grew into himself, broad shoulders now filling out t-shirts, jawline sharper, his expressions harder to read. There's this quiet intensity about him, like he's constantly observing the world, but never quite speaking enough of it. We've only talked a handful of times. A casual hey across the driveway, a brief comment about the heat or the garbage pickup. But each time, there was something else, there a hesitation in his smile, a flicker in his eyes that lingered a beat. Too long. And lately, the fence. I caught him looking through the crack 2 weeks ago. At first, I thought I imagined it a sliver of his hazel eye, framed in wood and curiosity. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, bare feet in the grass, pretending to sip from an empty coffee mug. He didn't move either. It was weird. It should have been uncomfortable. But it wasn't. That's when something started to change in me. I noticed myself thinking about him when I shouldn't, wondering what. His voice really sounded like when he wasn't shouting across yards. What kind of music he played in those earbuds. Whether he'd ever looked at anyone else the way he looked at me through that fence. It felt ridiculous at first. He was younger, just starting his life. I was barely holding mine together. But feelings don't ask permission. They just creep in quiet, slow, like the evening sun stretching long shadows across the backyard last night. I was out late watering again, shirtless. It was still too hot even past 9. I could hear the soft creak of his porch steps, his familiar shuffle across the grass. I didn't turn, but I felt him. Knew he was there. And then there was the faintest sound, a sharp inhale like someone getting caught mid-thought. Today. Something's different. The air feels charged. I'm planning to clean out the shed, an excuse to be outside longer. I told myself it was just chores, but we both know that's not true. There's an ache in my chest I haven't named yet, a kind of nervous hope. I haven't let myself believe in since I was his age. In that fence, that old worn-out barrier. It suddenly feels less like something meant to divide and more like the thinnest thread holding us apart. One I'm not sure I want to leave untouched much longer. I think today. I might just turn around. And see what happens. Asterisk. The first real conversation we had happened over a flat basketball. I was in the driveway, trying to get a little fresh air between design deadlines, when I heard the thud of something hitting my garage door. Sorry. Mason's voice called out from the sidewalk. I looked over and saw him jogging toward me, barefoot in joggers and a faded red hoodie, holding up one hand and that deflated basketball in the other. It bounced off my rim weird, he said, catching his breath as he stopped a few feet away. No harm done, I said. Though your ball's seen better days. He grinned, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Yeah, it's kinda dead. You have a pump? Yeah, inside. Come on. It felt like nothing, just a neighbor borrowing something simple, but the way he followed me into the garage, how he scanned the place like he was memorizing every object, made something shift. When I handed him the pump, our fingers brushed. He didn't pull back right away. Neither did I. Thanks, he said, eyes flicking up to mine for a heartbeat too long that day turned into more. A week later, he knocked on the door with 2 sodas in hand. Figured you could use some caffeine. Then another time he offered to help mow the lawn just because. One afternoon, I stepped outside to find him sitting in my backyard, leaning back on his elbows in the grass like he belonged there. And maybe somehow he did. We didn't talk about big things. Not yet, but we had a rhythm jokes about how bad the Arizona sun was trying to kill us. Mock arguments about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. I said yes. He said, "You're dead to me," and long meandering talks about movies. You seriously never watched Donnie Darko? He asked one evening, lying beside me on the warm concrete near the backyard fire pit. The stars were just starting to flicker above us. I was more of a stand-by-me kind of guy. He turned to face me, propped on one elbow, his eyes searching. Mine, I like that one too. There was a silence between us then, not awkward, not tense. Just thick, full, like we both knew something was in the air but didn't have the words for it yet. The complication came quietly, a week ago. I got a message from a former client asking if I'd come stay with them in Sedona for a design retreat. Just 3 days, paid, good for the resume. I almost didn't bring it up to Mason, but something in me wanted to. Thinking of taking a trip next weekend, I mentioned casually while we were tossing a football back and forth in the backyard. Cool, he said, catching it with one hand. Where to? Sedona? Some design thing, just a few days. His expression didn't shift much, but he fumbled the return throw. I caught it. You good? Yeah, he said, shrugging. Sounds fun. Good for you. But he got quieter. After that dot it was subtle, but I noticed. Less texting. Shorter replies. One afternoon he didn't come over at all, even though he usually did. I found myself staring at the fence, wondering if he was still on the other side, watching, wondering if he missed me. Or worse, if I'd imagined everything between us. When he did come back around, it was different. We were sitting on my porch steps, both sipping cold lemonades. He was fidgeting with the straw wrapper, shredding it between his fingers. So, he said, not looking at me, is it like a big deal? The trip? Not really. I mean, it's work, but I could skip it if I had to. Are you going to? I don't know yet, he nodded, quiet for a moment. Then you should go, if it's good for you. That was the first time I realized how much his approval mattered to me. That night I lay awake thinking about him. About his quiet laughter, the way his eyebrows furrowed when he concentrated, how his voice dipped when he was tired. And I wondered if maybe this thing between us, whatever it was, meant something more to him too. There were signs. The way he always sat close, even when there was space. How his knee would sometimes brush mine and stay there a little too long. Once I caught him staring when I changed shirts outside. He looked away fast, cheeks coloring, but he didn't apologize. One night, we were watching a movie on my laptop in the living room. The couch was small, our arms touched, then our thighs. Neither of us moved. Somewhere between a quiet scene and the credits, his head dropped slightly onto my shoulder. I'm not sleepy. He said, his voice low. Didn't say you were? He didn't lift his head. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just imagining it. Whatever this was, he felt it too. Even if neither of us had the courage to say it yet. The universe has a strange sense of humor. I finally made up my mind not to go on the Sedona trip for reasons I wasn't yet ready to admit aloud, and the very next day, my mom's car broke down. Just take my truck, she said, dropping the keys into my palm with a shrug. I won't need it this weekend. Your uncle's picking me up for the family thing. Right, the family thing. I had completely forgotten. 3 days of the house entirely to myself, or at least that was the plan. I had just finished breakfast when there was a knock on the back door, an unusual choice, since most people use the front. When I opened it, Mason was standing there, hoodie half-zipped, hair damp like he'd just come from a shower. He looked sheepish. My aunt left early for a weekend retreat thing. I didn't know she was leaving today. He shifted his weight. She thought I'd be gone too, but my friend canceled. And I forgot my house key. You locked out? He gave me a look like he didn't want to admit it, but nodded. Yeah, won't be back till tomorrow afternoon. There was a pause between us. A long one. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. You wanna hang here until she's back? I said casually, though my pulse kicked up. His relief was immediate. Really? That okay? Of course, come in. He stepped inside, and just like that, my quiet weekend plans became something else entirely. By afternoon, we were both shirtless in the backyard, sweating over a broken lawn chair I'd promised myself I'd fix 6 summers ago. Mason was sitting cross-legged in the grass, sorting screws into a neat little pile while I tried and failed not to notice the curve of his spine when he leaned forward, or the way the sun caught on the light hair dusting his arms. "So, you always this bad at fixing stuff?" he asked, smirking. "Only when someone's distracting me." I shot back. He looked up at me slowly, the smile lingering at the edge of his mouth. "Oh? Who's distracting you?" My throat went dry, but I smiled anyway. "You know who." "There." It was again silence thick with possibility. But instead of breaking it, he just held my gaze for a moment longer than he should have. Then he looked back down, pretending to be focused on a bolt that didn't fit. After a lazy evening and a shared dinner of grilled cheese and frozen fries, we ended up in the living room, the lights dim, and a random old movie playing low in the background. Neither of us was really watching. I was lying back on the couch, and Mason was beside me, legs stretched out, his socked foot occasionally brushing mine. "You tired?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "Just comfortable." He said it so simply, so honestly, and then, almost without thinking, he leaned sideways and rested his head on my chest. I froze. His body was warm against mine, his hand resting on the curve of my ribs, fingers splayed in casual innocence. But my heart thudded beneath. Him like it had just been jump-started. He didn't move. Didn't say a word. I could have said something. I should have. But instead, I just let my hand drift hesitantly to his shoulder. Just the faintest pressure. He didn't flinch. I stared at the ceiling, at the pattern of shadows dancing from the TV screen. At nothing. All I could feel was him. His breath rose and fell against me. His fingertips brushed my side once, twice. An accidental graze, I think. But it left my skin burning. What are we doing? That thought repeated over and over in my mind. I wanted to ask it out loud. I wanted to push this moment forward or pull it back, anything but linger in this unbearable in-between. But then his voice broke the silence. "I used to watch you. You know?" My entire body tensed. "Through the fence?" he added, quieter now. Not in a creepy way. I like seeing you out there. You seemed calm, like you had your life figured out." I let out a soft breath. "That's funny. I was usually out there because I felt like everything was falling apart." He laughed, but it was a fragile sound. "Well, you wore it well." Long pause. The room felt impossibly still. "Mason," I began, but the words got stuck. "I know," he whispered. I turned to look at him. He was already looking up at me, his face close, too close. Every detail of him sharp in the flickering light, his parted lips, the twitch of his jaw, the glint of something nervous in his eyes. I wasn't imagining it, I said softly. He shook his head. Neither was I. I couldn't breathe. His hand slid up to rest just beneath my collarbone, barely there, like he was asking permission. My hand found his wrist, not to stop him, just to feel it. The pulse under his skin was as fast as mine, and still, neither of us moved further, because we were standing on a ledge and we both knew it. Later that night, I gave him the guest room, even though it felt like part of me wanted him to ask to stay in mine. He didn't, and I didn't offer, but the silence between our rooms buzzed like a live wire. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, playing everything over again. The way he leaned into me, the way his voice dropped when he confessed, the weight of his body, warm and trusting. Something was shifting, something fragile and real, and I didn't know where it would go, but I knew one thing: I didn't want to lose it. I woke up before the sun. The guest room door was still closed, the hallway dim and quiet, but something about the house felt aware, like it remembered last night the same way I did. Every word, every touch, every almost. I made coffee just to keep my hands busy. The mug shook slightly when I lifted it to my lips. When Mason finally emerged, his hoodie was wrinkled, his hair still messy from sleep. He didn't say anything right away, just rubbed at one eye and gave me a small, tired smile. "Hey." Morning, I said, my voice lower than usual. Sleep okay? He nodded, then glanced away. Yeah, kinda weird bed, though. I almost joked. I could have offered mine, but the words stayed behind my teeth. We tiptoed around each other all morning, like we were both trying to pretend everything was still normal when neither of us believed it. He lingered in the living room, longer than necessary. I made a second pot of coffee just so I wouldn't have to look him in the eye. By late afternoon, the tension had become unbearable. We were sitting on the floor of the living room playing some mindless card game. Mason had suggested Go Fish. Of all things. He was sprawled on his stomach, propped up on his elbows. I was sitting cross-legged, barely focused, my fingers drumming on my knee. Neither of us cared who was winning. I think you're cheating, I mumbled, mostly to break the silence. He gave me a crooked smile. I think you're just bad at this. I tossed a card at him. It bounced off his arm and fell to the carpet. He picked it up slowly, then looked at me. I've been trying to figure out how to talk to you since last night, he said suddenly. Froze. He sat up, crossing his legs to mirror me, the cards forgotten between us. I'm not good at this, he continued. I'm not smooth or subtle, or even sure what I'm doing half the time. Mason, no, let me just say this before I lose my nerve. He ran a hand through his hair, then laughed under his breath, almost bitterly. God, I've played this conversation 100 different ways in my head. He looked at me and his voice softened. I didn't start watching you because I was curious. I mean, yeah, maybe at first it was curiosity, but then I kept watching because you were the only person who seemed real. My chest tightened. I'd come home from school and hear your music through the wall, or see you out in the yard, just existing, calm, doing your thing. And you never looked like you were pretending, you just were. And I don't know, I started feeling safe around you before I even really knew you. He looked down at his lap, his voice dropping. And, then I started wanting to know you. For real. But I didn't think you'd ever look at me the way I looked at you. I couldn't speak. My heart pounded so hard it felt like my ribs were rattling. Mason, I finally managed. You're not the only one who's been struggling to find the right words. His head lifted slowly, his eyes wide with quiet hope. I inhaled shakily. I told myself this was nothing, that I was just being kind, just being a good neighbor. But I wasn't. I kept walking out to that fence hoping I'd catch you watching. I made excuses to be in the yard. I waited for you to knock. I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper. You made me feel seen again, after a long time of feeling invisible. He blinked. His bottom lip trembled just slightly. I kept going, but I didn't say anything because I swallowed, hard. Because you're younger, because I didn't want to ruin whatever this was. Because I was scared that I was reading it all wrong, and if I crossed a line. You didn't, he interrupted. The room felt very still. You didn't read it wrong. He inched closer. One hand came to rest gently on the floor beside mine, not touching, just near. His fingers opened, palm up, like an invitation he wasn't quite brave enough to voice. I looked down at it. Everything in me screamed to reach across that small gap, to close it, to say all the things I'd been swallowing for weeks. But I hesitated. What happens if this changes everything? I said softly, Mason's voice cracked with honesty. Then maybe everything needs to change. I reached out. My fingers curled into his, warm and nervous and steady all at once. He exhaled shakily, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. You're shaking, I whispered. So are you, he whispered back. We sat like that for a long moment, breathing, letting it sink in. Then Mason shifted forward. Slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. I've never done this before, he said. What? He hesitated. This us admitting something real. Wanting someone and not hiding it, I searched his face. You're not hiding now. He shook his head. No, I don't want to hide anymore. And then, with a softness that undid me completely, he leaned in. Our foreheads touched first. Then his nose brushed mine. He was trembling. Are you sure? I asked, my voice breaking. I've never been more sure of anything, he said. And then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't fireworks or perfect angles or movie script passion. It was slow and unsure and deeply human. His lips were warm and tentative, tasting like breath mints and fear and something new. I didn't realize I was crying until he pulled back, just enough to look at me. "You okay?" he asked, brushing his thumb gently under my eye. I nodded, unable to speak. He kissed me again, this time with more confidence, and I kissed him back. It felt like something inside me finally clicked into place, like I'd been walking around half asleep, and now I was finally awake. We ended up lying side by side on the couch, his head on my chest again, his fingers tracing slow shapes on my stomach through my shirt. We didn't say much, we didn't need to, because something had broken open, and neither of us wanted to close it. We didn't move for a long time. Mason lay quietly against me, his body warm and relaxed now in a way I hadn't felt before. His breathing had slowed, his cheek resting on my chest like he'd done it 100 times. But now it meant something. He traced a small circle over my shirt with his fingertip. I wasn't sure if this would feel different after. "Does it?" I asked softly, brushing my fingers through his hair. He turned his face slightly into me. "Yeah, it feels better, like I'm not pretending anymore." I smiled at the ceiling. "Yeah, me too." There was a long pause, not out of discomfort, but something deeper, like we were both still absorbing the fact that the silence between us had finally been broken. That the tension wasn't just tension. It was real, mutual. Mason sat up a little, propping himself on one elbow so he could look at me. His hair was sticking out in uneven tufts. He looked younger, but also somehow more him. "So," he said, drawing the word out, "am I allowed to make fun of your taste in movies now that we've kissed?" I narrowed my eyes playfully. "You've always made fun of my movies." "Yeah, but now I get to do it with love in my heart." "Is that what that was?" "Love?" He blinked. His teasing expression flickered into something serious for a moment. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Not yet. But I know I like being around you more than anyone else. I know I think about you even when I'm trying not to. And I know when you smile at me, my stomach does this weird, nervous backflip thing." I laughed, soft and surprised. "Sounds like something close." "Yeah," he said. "Close enough for now." I leaned in, kissing him again, light and slow. He melted into it, his hand slipping behind my neck, thumb brushing gently along my skin. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't urgent. Just there, present. When we finally pulled apart, he flopped onto, his back beside me on the couch, sighing contentedly. "This is going to get complicated, isn't it?" he asked, staring at the ceiling. "Probably," I admitted. He turned his head to face me. "The age thing, people judging. My aunt finding out, I know." I reached for his hand, threading our fingers together. "But we don't have to. Figure it all out tonight or tomorrow." He gave a small smile. "So, one day at a time?" "One day at a time," I echoed. There was a comfortable silence after that. I could feel the warmth of his hand in mine, the steady pulse beneath. His skin, his pinky curled around mine like it belonged there. We lay there, shoulder to shoulder, watching the ceiling fan spin above us. "I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm doing," I said. "I've been burned before. I've been wrong before. But with you, I keep wanting to try, even if I'm scared." He didn't answer right away, then he squeezed my hand. "Me too." We moved through the rest of the day like we were learning each other from scratch. In the kitchen, he sat on the counter while I cooked spaghetti, swinging his legs and offering sarcastic commentary on my sauce-stirring skills. "You do know. This isn't chopped, right?" he teased. "Says the guy who thinks cereal counts as a meal." "Hey," he said, grinning, "cereal is versatile." Later, we sat cross-legged on the floor with mismatched bowls, bumping knees as we ate, and watched the steam curl into the space between us. He stole a meatball off my plate, grinning proudly like he'd won something sacred. "You're going to be obnoxious now, aren't you?" I said. He shrugged, biting into it. "Maybe, but you like me this way." "Unfortunately, yes." After dinner, we curled up again on the couch, this time with less tension, more certainty. His head found my shoulder like it was home. My arm wrapped around him like it knew the shape of him now. We didn't talk much, just exchanged looks, light touches, quiet grins. At one point, he looked up at me, his voice soft and serious. I don't want this to be a secret. We'll take it slow, I said. Do it right, he nodded. Okay, but I don't want to feel like I'm hiding something beautiful. My throat tightened. I pressed my lips to his temple. Gently, neither do I. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough. The sun was barely peeking over the rooftops when I heard Mason moving in the kitchen, quiet, purposeful, like he didn't want to wake me even though I was already up. I stayed in the doorway for a minute, just watching him. He was standing, barefoot, hair tousled, wearing the same hoodie from the day before. He was focused on trying to work the old French press I hadn't used in years, squinting at the instructions on his phone. You're up early, I said, smiling. He jumped slightly, then turned with a sheepish grin. Trying to be romantic. But this thing is an actual puzzle. You ever consider just buying a normal coffee maker? I walked over and took it from him. I was trying to be sophisticated. More like unnecessarily complicated. He leaned against the counter while I prepped the coffee, and for a moment we just stood in the soft morning light together. No pressure, no tension. Just a warm, quiet kind of closeness that filled the space more fully than words could. So, he started, fingers drumming on the counter. I was thinking, maybe we do something today. Like what? He shrugged. Doesn't matter, something normal, something that feels like us. I thought for a moment, then smiled. The park. Still does those Sunday food truck things, live music. Shady trees, bad tacos, he grinned. Perfect. We spent the early afternoon in that dusty park just a few blocks from the house, sitting on the grass with plastic trays in our laps and spicy salsa staining our napkins. A blues band played lazily under the gazebo, and families wandered past, with dogs and strollers. No one looked twice at us. Mason lay back with his arms crossed behind his head, sunglasses slipping down his nose. You ever think, he said, about how weird it is that all of this, he gestured around lazily, was happening before we ever said anything? I looked down at him, shielding my eyes from the sun. You mean like while you were watching me through the fence? He laughed. I was admiring, not spying. Yeah. He reached up and tugged on my wrist, pulling me down beside him. Okay, fine, I was spying. But you didn't make it easy to ignore. You were always walking around shirtless, looking all sad and poetic. I wasn't trying to be poetic. Well, he said, smiling, you were. We lay there for while our shoulders brushing, fingers grazing occasionally until they finally laced together, and stayed that way. Later that evening, back at the house, we sat on the porch steps watching the light fade. The sun dipped low, casting long golden streaks across the fence, the same one that had separated us for so long. Now, it felt more like a symbol of everything we'd seen through, rather than what we'd hidden behind. Mason nudged me gently. With his knee. You know what's funny? What? I think I liked the idea of you before I ever really knew you. Like, I built this image in my head. And now that I do know you, it's not what I imagined. I raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like a compliment. He turned to me, sincere. It is. You're better than the version I made up? That hit harder than I expected. I looked down at our joined hands, thumbs gently moving back and forth. I don't know what this will look like in a month, I admitted, or what people will think, or if it'll be easy. Probably not, he said, but I want to try. He squeezed my hand. Me too. There was a quiet pause before he leaned his head on my shoulder, his voice low and steady. Promise me something? Anything. Don't disappear if it gets hard. I turned to him. Only if you promise. The same. He nodded. Deal. We sat like that as the sky darkened, the first stars blinking into place overhead. Eventually, Mason sat up, pulled something from his hoodie pocket, and held it out to me, a tiny, folded piece of notebook paper, creased at the corners. What's this? Open it. I unfolded it slowly. Inside, in messy handwriting, was a sketch of the fence, our fence. and a tiny pair of eyes drawn peeking through the knot in the wood. My backyard was scribbled beyond it with a stick figure that looked suspiciously like me, taller, messy hair, coffee cup in hand. A speech bubble floated from my head. It read, "You gonna stare forever, or are you coming over?" I laughed, touched. "You made this?" "Yeah, a while ago." Before I ever said anything, I folded it back carefully and slipped it into my pocket. "I'm gonna keep this," I said. No, we didn't need anything else that night, not a big plan. Not a dramatic ending, just this. The quiet sound of crickets, the cool breeze brushing past, and his fingers slipping into mine again like they'd been waiting for this all along, and maybe they had, because somehow, in the simplest moment of all, I realized we were no longer waiting, we were beginning.